The views expressed in this program do not necessarily reflect those of this station.
Welcome to Insights into Northeast Michigan, a WBKB News public affairs program. Insights deals with the issues affecting those in the community as well as Northeast Michigan and the state. And now, Insights into Northeast Michigan.
Hello and welcome to this edition of Insights. Today we are talking about the tradition of Northern Michigan hunting. Joining me today is Ian Doronso. And Ian, thanks for joining us today.
Well, hey, thanks for having me.
And so we're talking about hunting today. Tell me, how did you get into hunting?
I got into hunting long ago, probably when I was about 3 or 4, when my dad started taking my brother and I to the deer blind. I was born and raised into it. Didn't really have a choice, but I wouldn't have it any other way.
Mm-hmm. And were you starting with deer? Is that the...
Yep, yeah, it started with deer. Started with Dad loading me and my brother up and heading out to camp, heading to the blind. Eric and I, we were both a little bit of a handful, so some days one of us would go with Grandpa, one of us would go with Dad, and then we'd switch. And yeah, that was the flame that started everything for me.
Mm-hmm. So what about it hooked you, would you say?
What about it hooked me would probably be the never knowing of what's going to happen. When you're out in the woods, there's a lot of things that could happen. There's a lot of things that you want to happen, and you can't control any of it. But when something finally happens, like a buck walks out or a deer walks out or anything, it's just immediate adrenaline rush. And it's just something that you can't control, and it's something that I think every outdoorsman strives for, to get that feeling every day out in the woods. Mm.
And I myself am a fisherman, so I think it might be kind of the same thing, because when you throw your line in the water, you never know what you're going to get.
Exactly. You just never know when it's going to happen, but you could spend weeks, months, days preparing for that, and that's what you want to happen. And then when it finally happens, that's what keeps you coming back.
Mm-hmm. So would you say that hunting is probably, this season, is this your favorite time of the year here?
Oh yeah, hands down, from September to January, this is my favorite time of year.
Gotcha. And hunting, we're talking about all of Northern Michigan here and the tradition of hunting in Northern Michigan. So how do you see other hunters and their feelings about hunting in Northern Michigan, I should say? Well,
I would say every hunter has his own degree of how he handles it. Some guys eat, sleep, and breathe deer hunting year-round. I, on the other hand, I'm a fisherman as well, so summer is focused on fishing, but then once September comes, then it's time to get the trail cameras out, start putting the food plots in, start my scouting. Some guys are a lot more hardcore than that. Some guys are the opposite end of the spectrum, where, hey, the week before deer season, that's when they start getting ready. And that's fine. That's fine. But, everybody's got their own tale to tell. Everybody's chasing their own trophy. And I think that's what makes hunting in Michigan so great, is we're just such a diverse state. There's different ways to hunt. You could use a bow, you could use a crossbow, the variety of guns that you can use. So yeah, we're just a very diverse state for deer hunting, and it's pretty cool, I think.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned that everyone's going to have one of their favorite stories. Could you tell me one of yours, maybe?
Oh, gosh. Where do I start? Probably one of my favorite stories was harvesting my first deer. I was 12 years old, had my brand new bow in hand that my dad went and bought for me, and I got in my tree stand probably about 20 minutes earlier than my brother did, and he was on the way to his stand, and he actually he jumped a buck, and he saw the buck heading right for my tree stand, and sure enough, the deer walked out perfect, and I made a great shot on it, surprised myself, and got myself a nice little 6-pointer for my first deer.
Nice little 6-pointer. That was your first deer?
Yep, that was my very first deer.
Wow.
Yep.
And that's something that's going to follow you through the rest of your life?
Oh, yeah, for sure. And it was actually cool. I shot that buck at a blind where it was my great-grandpa's last blind. That's where he did his last hunts. And then the next following year, my brother was in that same tree stand and he shot his first deer out of that same tree. So pretty cool.
So Ian, what would you say is the most popular thing to hunt in Michigan? Would you say it's deer?
Yeah, I would say deer is probably the most popular thing to hunt in northern Michigan. I mean, you drive down the road, you see them all the time, you see them everywhere. People have them in their yards when they don't want them. So, and it's probably the best tasting animal in northern Michigan. I think that's hard to argue with.
Mm-hmm. What do you think is the tastiest part? What's your favorite part of the deer to eat, you'd say?
Definitely the loins. Some guys are real big on the heart. I've tried it many times, not a fan of it, but it's safe to say I've tried every part of the deer. You know, there's a lot of meat to get off a deer. You'd be surprised, and it's all pretty tasty.
And Ian, you mentioned that deer can be in people's yard. You see them all over the road sometimes. So it's safe to say that there's actually some goods that come from hunting, and we're actually going to get to that right after this break. Welcome back. Ian, before we went to break, we were talking that there are uses to hunting. Could you go over a couple of those?
Well, there's lots of uses to deer hunting in Michigan. One of them, the biggest thing for me, is food. Got to be able to put food on the table, and getting out in the woods here in northern Michigan, I mean, the grocery store here is endless. There's lots of animals to harvest. They're all really tasty. Whitetail deer being my favorite. I try to harvest a couple deer every year. Fills the freezer, makes the family happy. Another, big use for deer hunting is, population control. Man has definitely affected populations and, the woods, and there's deer going everywhere where we don't want them to go. But the deer were here first, and, in a way, I think we're stepping on their grounds. And, the deer are always getting hit by cars. I'm sure insurance companies love it that we're out there harvesting a few deer. The farmers, too, also. I mean, I know deer can wreak havoc on a small parcel of corn or soybeans or what have you. I mean, it does not take very many deer to wipe out a whole field. So it's very important that we keep balance, keep everything in check.
Absolutely. And actually, on our way to camp, your camp here, I actually saw a deer when we were going through the woods. So they're all over the roads. How big of a problem do you see that with driving?
I would say that's a pretty big problem. I mean, I've definitely hit my fair share of deer in the last couple of years, and it's really unfortunate. I mean, I love chasing after deer just like everybody else, and it's really unfortunate to hit one with your vehicle. And so yeah, hunters in the woods obviously pushes deer out onto the roads, but if everybody does their part and keep everything in check, we'll be all right.
Mm-hmm. And that is population control. And when deer are going into a farm, what kind of damage can that do to a farmer's crops there?
They can do a lot of damage, and when a deer comes into a farmer's field and wipes out the whole field, I mean, that's money lost right there. That's something that the farmer is never going to get back. It's gone. He's not going to get that back till next year's planting. And who's to say that those same deer aren't just going to come back next year and, keep eating? But so yeah, it's very important, keep them thinned out, but within means,
Absolutely. And one thing I wanted to talk about today is how we should be respecting nature, right? And we shouldn't just be killing these animals. We should also be respecting them.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
How would you say you appreciate nature? What is your appreciation?
Well, I mean, I only take fair, ethical shots. If you don't have a good shot opportunity to make a clean, quick kill, then you don't take that shot. I mean, you gotta know your limits, and you gotta do what's right for the animal. I mean, nobody wants to make a poor shot and make an animal suffer. That's not what hunting's all about. It's not, here in northern Michigan, I mean, it's not just about going out and trying to kill as many deer and the biggest deer. It's about what's doing right for you and, what you like, and trying to harvest the animal cleanly and properly.
So Ian, would you say that that's the typical attitude of people in northern Michigan, to be respecting of the animals?
Yeah, I would say so. I would say everybody around here, treats animals with respect. And I think it's safe to say, you do hear of a few cases where people don't, but, not everybody's perfect. People make mistakes. And it is an imperfect sport. I mean, there are things that happen where, low light conditions, or you think a limb could be a deer's antlers. I mean, people make mistakes. It's an imperfect sport, but I think for the most part, everybody does a good job. One thing, to touch on respect, one thing that my dad and grandpa taught me is when you harvest an animal, you gotta get down on a knee and thank the good Lord for letting you harvest this animal. And, that animal gave up his life, but he's gonna go to good use.
Absolutely, and that's one of the most important things, isn't it, to make sure that the animal is being used entirely.
Oh, yeah, for sure. There's lots of butcher shops in northern Michigan. There's lots of places you can take your deer. The guys around here, they do a great job, and there's a lot of people, myself included, that I butcher my animal on my own. But yeah, there's a million ways you could get a deer harvested and get it processed and get it in your freezer on your table.
Mm-hmm. And so this hunting season, what would you say is a fair haul for the season?
A fair haul?
Or maybe if you want to go by weekly or monthly, I'm not sure.
Well, I'm always happy. For a good hunt, for me, if I see a deer, I am very happy. There's so much that goes into hunting that has nothing to do with taking the animal. But if I can harvest one deer a year, I'm very happy. And a successful hunt for me is just having an encounter with a deer. It's hard to beat that. And if you get a little meat in the freezer at the end of the year, then you're doing all right.
Ian, so could you tell me some of the regulations that are important to take note of while you're hunting?
Well, for all of us that know, the rules and regulation book for Michigan is pretty thick. There's a lot to take in. It can be overwhelming. You can definitely tell it was written in a courtroom and not in a deer camp. But the biggest thing that a lot of Michiganders have to get comfortable with and get used to is no baiting, no feeding, no baiting. They've also changed around what scents you can use, for the doe urine and what have you. There's some changes on that you gotta watch out for this year. You gotta remember when you're out on state land that it is the state's land. It is not yours. There's a lot of rules that go along with that you gotta follow, and if you don't, you're probably gonna get a ticket, and that's just the way it goes. So it definitely pays to read ahead.
Absolutely. And Ian, after we come back from break, I'm going to have you give me some tips on how to get that deer. How's that sound?
Hey, that sounds all right.
All right, we'll be right back. Welcome back. Ian, you're going to give us some tips on hunting. How can people get that deer they've been waiting for all season?
Well, I am no great white hunter, but some good tips for me, just some good rules to follow is you got to be patient. You got to be patient. That's the biggest part about being out in the woods and hunting is just go out there and just sit and be quiet and listen. And you'd be surprised what you can see if you just leave the phone in the backpack and just look around in the woods and listen. Because that's what a deer does. Deer, they move slow. So you got to listen. But they got great eyes, so you got to be still, but they also got a great nose. And you're not going to fool a deer's nose. So definitely go in scent-free the best you can. There's lots of different clothes and sprays and treatments you can use. I've probably used them all. And some work better than others, some don't work at all. But everybody's got to figure that out on their own. But definitely preparation. If you're in a tree stand, trim a couple limbs if you can, or practice drawing back your bow in the tree, and then target practice, because you're gonna want to make your shots count, because you're not gonna get a whole lot of opportunities. And I've had my fair share of misses, and I learned from every single one of them. I mean, if anybody hunts long enough, you're going to miss. It's just a matter of time. It happens. Things go wrong. But the biggest, if you know your equipment and you're comfortable with it, and if you can just get out in a good spot and just be a good hunter, you know, just sit still, listen, scent free, you'd be surprised what could happen.
And just about a minute ago, you were painting this really nice picture about how you're just sitting out there, not doing anything, and you're just kind of taking in the nature around you. Is that something that you enjoy while hunting?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, just getting out in the woods, and even when I'm deer hunting, I mean, it's amazing how many other animals you see. I mean, bobcat, coyote, bear, I mean, all the different birds and small game. And it's cool just to sit there, you know, be still, be quiet, and watch them interact. And then, you know, just more time in the woods, you're going to learn more things about the area you're hunting. You know, you're going to pick up quick, like, okay, this is not a morning spot, or this is a morning spot, or, you know, or this is a good afternoon spot. And the more you get out in the woods, and the more patient you are, the better hunter, in my opinion, the better you'll be eventually. And northern Michigan is a highly pressured hunting area. There's a lot of hunters out there, and that's okay, because it could work to your favor. You know, not everybody's patient and sits all day, so you never know what's going to happen.
Mm-hmm. And so the tradition of hunting in northern Michigan is something that's very prevalent here in Alpena especially. So besides just that one moment where you're taking the shot, what other things do you enjoy about hunting?
Definitely the camp life. Definitely being at camp with family and friends. I mean, that excitement is endless, and that's one of the biggest things I look forward to now. I've harvested a fair amount of deer in my life, but just hanging out here with friends and family, that's awesome. I think that's the biggest thing. I think that's what I think a lot of guys look forward to, is just getting here and the camaraderie. That and the food. We're pretty lucky to have a pretty good cook out here, and he takes good care of us.
That's awesome. And before this interview, you mentioned to me about these notebooks that you sign and write in every time you come up here. So you want to tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah. Gosh, I guess great-grandpa probably started it. And, you know, every time we come to camp, you got to write in the book, you know, who was here, what you did. And it started back in deer season. So it's cool to go and look back and see, you know, who hunted where and what they saw and if they got anything or what have you, and, you know, what other camps came to visit, and, oh, if somebody fell in the river on their way here or not. And so there's lots of just cool camp stuff that comes along with deer season.
Definitely a lot of history in those books, absolutely. And do you see other traditions in hunting with other people that you know, other hunters?
Yeah, you know, I'd say every camp has got its funny little quirks. You know, everybody does things different. You know, some guys, they might not shower all week or something, or you just never know. I mean, everybody's a little different. Everybody's got their edge. Yeah, I mean, it's camp life. You never know what's going to happen.
Not showering all week, is that like a superstitious thing?
That would be a superstitious thing.
Is superstition quite a popular thing?
I would say amongst hunters, yeah. I mean, superstition superstitious stuff is pretty serious.
Mm-hmm. Do you have any of your own?
I shower. I'm not afraid to shower.
Okay.
But other than that, I got some lucky shirts, some lucky hats, some spots that I only go to like in the morning, stuff like that, where anything that I feel like can give me an edge, I'm gonna use it.
Absolutely. And so we're getting close to the end of the show here. Is there anything that you'd like to say to people who may not have gone hunting before but are willing to try? And is there anything you could say to convince them to get out there?
Yeah, I would say give it a shot, give it a chance. You know, you can't get too discouraged right away if you don't see anything, but eventually, if you do your homework and you do a little scouting and talk to some friends or family, or you know, you can make it happen. It might not happen in your first season, but every time you get in the woods, you're gonna learn something. I can guarantee you that. You'll learn something, and you might learn that you love it, and you might learn that it's not for me. But it's definitely something that I love, and I know a lot of other guys around here do too, and it's pretty cool.
Awesome. And thank you so much for joining us today, Ian. I really appreciate it. And thank you for watching this edition of Insights.
Insights into Northeast Michigan is produced by WBKB News. If you have any comments, suggestions, or topics you would like to see on a future show, please email WBKB News. This has been a production of Thunder Bay Broadcasting Corporation. All rights reserved.